So anybody want to weigh in on budget adjustment? Representative Levitt.
I guess I just need a little more clarity about, I think those 4 dairy farms should be made whole, but I still don't quite understand what the issue is with the 5th one. And are they still delivering milk?
No.
No.
So I think the answer is no. I did ask Mike to try and get a handle on the facts here. And I think we can have the conversation without mentioning any, yeah, Mike, right. Thank you. Because both mics are over there.
No.
Representative Rice, can you help us with just sort of what exactly happened?
Yeah, I mean, so the 5th farm received a partial payment because my understanding is that they received the last of the funds that were available. So hypothetically, if there had been, 6.95 million instead of 6.9, whatever, if the estimate had been, accurate to include everything and not to say that it wasn't very close, and it was an estimate, but that is the reason they received a partial payment, not because they were only partially eligible or, they were found to be eligible. They received the last of the funds that were available. And now we're returning to this conversation because 4 other farms subsequently applied and there were no funds left for them and they were eligible. And I know that there have subsequently been, that farm is now not shipping milk. And so now wouldn't be eligible, if the timeline were to include now. But, my understanding is that when we set this up, it was to quickly get funds to farms that qualified according to what we laid out. And to me, it would be a hard decision to make, sort of putting aside any of the other things anybody might know about any given farm. We just look at, was this farm sort of found eligible for these funds at the time? The answer is yes. It would be a difficult decision to make to say, we're going to go back and provide the funds to the 4 farms that also were found eligible, but there wasn't funding left for them, but somehow justify not making the full payment that was only provided as a partial payment because the funds ran out. That's sort of what I have been trying to get a handle on, and that's.
And that 5th farm is still shipping or no?
No, it's not. It is not still shipping. It was only shipping during the period of eligibility, and I think it's since stopped again. But to me, that's sort of not.
That's one of the criteria, though, is you need to be
But we're only here.
back in time.
We're only here because the funds ran out.
Right.
So the other 4 farms are still shipping, but we haven't really even talked about that, whether they are or aren't.
Right.
It's just that they were eligible when the,
Right.
when we're during the period that we're looking at. And if the proper amount of money, if the actual exact amount of money that should have been set aside was set aside, we wouldn't be talking about this.
Right.
And I think that right, it's nobody's asked because it's not the situation, but what if one of those 4 farms had stopped shipping?
Right.
Right.
Which frankly could have been a very likely scenario given the situation these farms were in that led to our, wanting to do this in the first place.
Could happen between now. I see Rodney out of the current.
Oh, good. Okay, just want to be sure. Good peripheral vision.
You've been kicking me the whole time. Representative Grant.
So my understanding is that they were not eligible when they first applied because they weren't milk a cow. They went back to milk a cows to become eligible with no intention of continuing farming, dairy farming. So it's a case where somebody went back to milk it just to get this fund. And that really was not our intent. Our intent was to try to keep farmers going.
Well,
I'm just.
yeah, no, I totally understand, yeah, and I understand that. The two things that come to mind to me there I think our intentions were sort of multiple. One, obviously, the sort of chief intention was we really hope these funds will allow every dairy farm that's currently milking to make it through and stay in business. But we also were aware that that was not the most likely scenario, that this wasn't going to make these farms whole, that this wasn't going to solve all these problems. It was a little emergency patch. And part of it was to, also to try to help them pay their debts, get money paid back to the feed stores, get that money back into the rest of the economy that sort of surrounds these farms. And then the other thing that comes to mind is just that if they were, even if that was their intention, I have no reason not to believe that much more about the intimate details of the specific farm operation than I do. Even given that, they were deemed eligible by the agency and given a partial payment. So that's the part that I'm struggling with, is if the decision was that this wasn't a practice that was acceptable under the funding, then that should have been the decision, and they shouldn't have been deemed eligible. They were, after the scenario that you described, and they were given a partial payment. And I just don't know how we can then say, well, we're going to fulfill these other payments of these other farms that were deemed eligible, but the funds ran out, and not this one farm that was deemed eligible, but the funds ran out.
Let's hear from other, you go next.
One more fact that add to this was that, they're first found ineligible, so they in milking it makes them eligible, but they went to the back of the line essentially in that interim.
Because they had to reapply.
Exactly, and that's why by the time they reapplied, the fund had been exhausted.
Sure, but the other 4 farms we're talking about are also at the back of the line.
Right.
So that's my argument, is like, if we're going to be making a case for any of these funds, I feel like it should be for all of the funds.
Representative
Regardless
Burrow.
of the sort of-
And then I'll try to get to everybody here.
I actually have a question for Mike O'Grady. So if the farm was ineligible because they weren't milking cows, then eligible because they were, if we were to allocate this money now, they would not be eligible for the money. The way the law is written.
You're gonna have to put in some sort of legislative intent statement that you want that farm to be funded.
Okay, and that's, so that's the way I was reading it, and personally, I would not be open to changing the rule for someone to make them eligible while not milking, unless we're gonna do it for everybody that's not, and there's quite a few farms that you'd have to fund to do that, just me personally.
I think it was here next.
I have a question for Rodney. And I'm going to put you on the spot, and I apologize. Do you feel like the 5th farm is gaming the system in a way by stopping milking, starting up again, getting some money, and then stopping again? Because the suspicious person in me feels like that's kind of what they're doing.
Yeah.
But also, I have no idea what their intent was, and that's not for me to judge. If they were deemed eligible and they got the money and they got the last pot of money, I feel like that's not for us to say, but there's something about it that isn't quite sitting right with me. And I just wanted to check in with you to see how you feel about that.
But the question is, would they still be milking if they got this money?
Yeah.
The answer would be no.
Okay.
The reason they got done finally was not because of,
Wasn't because of a lack of funding.
I'm not going to say they weren't. I can't say they were making money, but Those other decisions on whether to put farm.
Okay,
And I
Milking cows,
I think-
not done farming.
milking cows, okay.
And I guess I'm just going to say that, and I don't doubt that or question that, but it's not testimony that we've heard. It's just about what we know.
Right.
I don't think we can impute intent upon those particular participants, but what we can do is look at our intent. And our intent was that these would be for participating farmers, taking this money, injecting it into the system, participating in the greater organic milk world. And if these people are not doing that anymore, my tendency would be to say, no, let's hold on that payment of that fifth farm. You know, it's contrary to what you're arguing for, but I mean, I think there is a limited amount of money here. The budget surplus is being pulled out, I'm sure, every direction. You know, maybe this money would go to pay off debts to grain companies, but that I don't know. All I know is that they're not farming anymore and that they weren't at the onset of this.
But then they weren't.
But then they were, but then they're not again.
But they did meet the criteria. That's where I keep getting stuck is,
Because they bought cows.
well, they met the criteria though. They met the criteria for being funded. And it's not, I feel like it's not our place to figure out what their intent was.
And I'm not doing that.
You know, were they gaming the system? Were they not gaming the system? They qualified for the money. They got a partial payment because there was no money left. And if there had been a full pot of money, they would have gotten their full amount. And I think that's kind of what we have to keep looking back at is they would have gotten it if the Agency of Ag had figured out exactly, and how could they,
Yeah.
that we needed $252,000 more, we wouldn't be sitting here. That fifth farm would have its money, regardless of what, if they knew they were going to go out of business or not. That's not, I don't think that's for us to determine.
And that to me is what makes that second 120.
Give everybody a chance here, and Representative Cole's been reading.
Mike,
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, you should piggyback on that, I think.
Very quickly, just to sort of hammer in the point that to me is what makes their $126,000 no different from
And others, yes.
the other four farms.
Is there a legal opinion on this that we can?
No, we can do whatever we want. The legal opinion is we ran out of money. I mean, the fact is we ran out of money. So you think, unless we want to ask Mike to tell us what our intent was, I mean, I don't know that he can read
Oh, okay.
minds
Yeah.
any more than we can. But Representative Cole, do you have a question or a comment?
Well, wasn't my initial question, but my current question is, have all the farms that received this funding stayed in business? In the milking
I
business?
think we established yes, in
Yes.
fact.
So it is
Yeah.
a very interesting distinction, of course, from those who did not.
Yeah, there were
receive funding.
129 farms, 127 applied, and all of them are still milking, except that one.
A
Is that right?
philosophical standpoint, I don't know what to think about perhaps anonymously hearing from these four farms, but something I've been considering just to have more questions answered for us, but I know that it's not really fair. Yeah,
Yeah, it's today.
okay.
But the question you would want to know from the four farms would be,
Yeah, I mean, well, in part, philosophically, I'm thinking that it's not really fair that we asked these four farms because nobody else was, had to ask or be asked. But I think for our understanding, it might be interesting, but.
I've got an idea here. Why don't we divide this into two different asks? The four farms are the priority. The fifth farm is just under that. And we ask for all of it with the idea that if we get some of it, we prioritize the four farms over the fifth. Separate asks.
So, thank you. I guess I don't understand if we're just looking at the question of eligibility during the time funds were available.
Right.
what is it that
Divides.
separates the priorities?
In this particular case, 4 operating farms versus 1 non-operable farm
Currently,
currently.
not when the funds were supposed to be going out the door.
Got that? I understand that,
And
but
so I just wonder, I mean, none of the 123 farms that receive payments have been subject to such examination.
it's true.
We have no idea
Yeah.
how much, how much they're milking now in shipping versus how much they were milking and shipping then.
Right.
I was also sort of thinking about yesterday when Steve was here, he was talking about how it seemed as though the intention was, and I think this is true, that the whole point of this was to try to make up for the difference with organic farms that are locked into contracts, that pay a certain price that was significantly below the cost of operation. That was what we were trying to do. But we know that farms that were, for instance, milking cows and processing on farm into yogurt received payments.
Right.
So that wasn't maybe fitting with what we thought our intent was.
Though I think the stipulation was shipping milk, and that activity wouldn't be considered shipping
I
milk.
believe that processing was also included.
What, is that true?
Yes, processing was included and we didn't form that testimony.
Very good point. Very good point, Mike.
But shipping or processing was actually the language that the agency used in their instructions. I don't think that our language, I don't think that we got into that level of detail.
So my feelings are based on maybe just personal intent, but I was thinking legislative intent when we talked about this last year. I had reservations about this whole program in the beginning, but came to terms with it because I felt like, and I'd have to go back and listen to testimony, but I thought that our intent was to bridge the gap. We heard testimony from people that said, and I think Josie maybe asked the question of, do you think this money will keep you in business? Will keep you shipping dairy? And felt like that this was money to try to help people get through a tough year and continue to dairy. That the markets hopefully would change and adjust. Everything was bad, which did happen. Prices have gone up. They're still not great, but they're better. And that is why the majority of those farms, if not all of them, are still in business. Hopefully, we did what we were trying to do. We bridged that gap. They're still in business. Feels like a good thing. Just a personal example. I shipped milk all of 2022. Sold my cows in January. I could have gotten a couple cows during the period in which you need to enroll for this program, milked them, shipped that milk, applied for the money, got it, and sold those cows. I did not do that because that was not the intent of the program.
Yeah.
My feeling is this money should go to farms that are fulfilling the intended obligation of what we were trying to do. And that feels like the 4 farms. That's all.
Henry, could you have with 2 cows or some small number of cows been able to get Organic Valley to come and take your milk?
They have, I think it's been it's a 1,000 pound minimum, or is it 500? 1,500. So I would have had to probably have 10 cows. Yes.
You didn't have to stay organic.
Yeah, I was still a member of DFA, so they would have legally been obligated to take my milk. Or Organic Valley would have taken, I was told when I got out, as farms were starting to pull off, I was told that if I wanted to come back, I could come back. So yes, but that's not, was not my intention, or, I just don't think that's what the point of the money was. But, and I'm like, on a personal level, and maybe that's not what the whole committee was feeling, but my coming to terms with saying that when we asked for this money originally, like, it was not just to help pay bills, it was to keep people in business. Because we need dairies, want dairies in Vermont. And so that's what the money was for, which I feel like it did.
Yeah.
Representative Graham.
The other piece to this puzzle is they did not go back to milking on the farm they were milking on because they couldn't. They went to another farm and started milking cows on the other farm just so they could get the money.
I'm just becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the amount of sort of specific individual description and intents we're describing without inviting this farm to testify before us. It feels like we should be sort of keeping that entirely separate and talking about what the program was, what the eligibility was, or inviting the farm to tell us what, their version of the story.
Because for whatever reason, we have information about this farm that we don't have about the other four.
Other 127.
So they qualified. They got money. The money ran out. Just like those other four farms who applied and they got their application in late and there was no money left. I feel like we should ask for all 5 farms just because intent wise, they met the criteria for being funded. And I think that's all we need to really consider is if ag had the money, they would have the money. And I don't think we can parse intent on the farm's part unless we bring them all 5 in to say, was your intent to, stop bringing in 4 cows, start milking just to get the money and then stop again? And we just don't know that. And that doesn't matter.
Just not make sure we're not doing
The
Sorry.
point earlier, Representative Rice, I think it's probably not practical at this point to bring that testimony from people who may be eligible here. And not that I think it's a bad idea, but I think we're going to have to move forward without that perspective. So I wonder whether people feel that, I think we've heard some people who have more or less come to a conclusion in their own mind about which approach we should take. I don't know whether everybody is quite there yet or whether anybody feels like there's something else they'd like to know other than to know from one of us, essentially, again, given that we're sort of running up against time. Yes.
My hand was up before all of you.
Which of you, we need buzzers. You may have been slightly ahead of everybody else, John.
Just a couple things in mind. One is that, like, we're not legally obligated to find any money because I think it said in statute that this program, you have to be eligible and it's only until the money is exhausted, which it was exhausted.
Yeah.
So it's not as if we or the agency has violated state statute. And the other thing is that I agree with Henry to some extent where if the intent was to keep farms going, a farm that had stopped and sold its cows generated a certain amount of money. So it's, in some ways, it's almost like they're double dipping by getting this grant plus selling their cows. And without impugning intent, they're the only farm that's not shipping now. Of all those farms.
I just want to say quickly, our original ask was 9.2 million. So our intent was cut down. So let's just remember that. We never wanted to go with 6.9, we wanted to go with 9.2. So our knees were chopped out from under us at the get-go.
Representative Cole?
There was a point Mike brought up yesterday during testimony about the timing of the rollout of grants and how that impacted the results we got, perhaps. Or I think I don't have, I'd be curious about getting more clarity around, I think this is a problem we see in a lot of administrative programs and administration of grants in general. And I want us to be, accountable and, not forget about like how things played out in terms of distribution of the money. And if that impacted results, how it impacted results. So I don't feel like we got full answers yesterday about that. Maybe we weren't asking specifically enough, but like, was it effective, the way we distribute these funds in a timely manner?
Representative Graham?
So, first of all, not every single firm that put money is still multi-cap.
Right.
My opinion would be to just ask for the full amount, so we can make sure we get money to them other four and stop arguing. So one got away with something.
Representative.
Yeah, that would go back to my original middle way, which is separate these two questions and have two separate asks or not.
I like Rodney's idea.
For what it's worth,
It'd be the first time with two really guys.
For what it's worth, I had the same or similar thought yesterday and mentioned it to a member of the committee who suggested that we not fund that way. So, for what it's worth.
Okay, fair enough.
Just quickly, I just don't want us to lose sight of the fact that the food bank wanted a $2 million ask, and let's put that in there.
They're coming in, or we will have more time.
That's for Meals on Wheels,
Yeah.
but not the food bank. So I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of that.
You might not be here, but we'll be talking about that.
Okay, I'm going to try and come back. I'll see. But I have another meeting at 3 now.
Okay. So let's do a straw poll. If you're comfortable with recommending the full amount, by full amount, I mean the 250 or whatever the number is, we can be clear on that before we make anything official, but recommending that amount, that larger amount to appropriations. Let's just see a show of hands on that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. If you would prefer to recommend the four-farm amount, which is 126,000, I think. Let's see a show of hands on that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. All right. Good. Thank you. Now, is everybody okay with sort of taking a deep breath? And since we've invited a group of folks to come in and have a different conversation, a less stressful conversation, I hope, and then we'll come back later on to the budget adjustment discussion. Mike, you're still free later? Okay, thank you.
Okay. You need to call me.
Okay, back up.